Friday, August the 7th. And these Fridays seem to be coming around pretty frequently, don't they? Um, so I want to talk to you today about prayer. So there was a young man went into a drugstore, and he purchased 3 boxes of chocolates: a small box, a medium box, and a large box. And when the pharmacist asked him about the 3 boxes, he said, "Well, I'm going over to a new girlfriend's house for supper tonight, and then we're going out. If she only lets me hold her hand, then I'm going to give her the small box. If she gives me a kiss on the cheek, then I'll give her the medium box. But if she really gives me a passionate kiss on the lips," he says, "I'm going to give her the big box." And so he made his purchases and went out. Well, that evening, as he went over to his girlfriend's family for dinner, he asked if he could open the meal in prayer. And he began to pray. He prayed up an earnest, intense prayer. It lasted for several minutes. And I think his girlfriend was stunned, because she turned around to him and whispered, she said, "Well, you never told me you were such a religious person." And he replied, he said, "And you never told me your dad was a pharmacist." So I tell you what, prayer's always good. But some people pray and give up too soon. And I've told you before that this is one topic that I've changed my mind on over the years. I always used to think, I've prayed once, the Lord heard me, and He loves me, and He'll give me what I want. But I think prayer should be a constant and consistent part of our life. According to the polls, prayer is an important part of American life. When they were polled, people said that 90% of people said that they prayed. 86% of people said they believed in God. So I don't know what the other 4% were doing. I don't know. But 83% said that they favor prayers at graduation exercises, and 70% said they favored prayer in school. So that 13%, I guess, thought that prayer was helpful once the kids left school, but it wasn't necessary in school. I don't know what that means. But this little mini message is centered around the acronym that you've probably heard. It's PUSH, P-U-S-H. And what does it mean? It says pray until something happens. It's interesting to me that when the disciples came to the Lord, they asked Him, "Lord, teach us how to pray." They didn't say, "Teach us how to do miracles, teach us how to heal the sick, teach us how to raise the dead," because they had been watching Him. And in watching Him, they realized that the secret to what He did publicly is what He was doing privately. He was sharing. He was spending time with God, and He was praying. And they realized that if they could learn to do what He was doing in private, in all probability, the public works would follow. And I told you I changed my mind about it. I always thought that I don't need to pray repetitively. But in Luke 18, the Lord talked about a parable about prayer. He told His disciples that they should always pray and not give up. And this is one of those cases where you don't have to wonder about the meaning of the parable, because it's given in the first verse. It says in Luke 18:1, "And He spake a parable unto them to this end." This was the point of it, that men always ought to pray and not to faint. And then the parable says that there was in a city a judge And the judge was an unrighteous judge. He feared not God, neither feared man. And there was a widow in that city, and she came to him saying, "Avenge me of mine adversary." And he would not for a while. But afterwards he said within himself, "Though I fear not God, nor regard man, yet because this widow troubleth me, I will avenge her, lest by her continual coming she weary me." And that weary me literally means, lest she almost gives me a poke in the eye. And the Lord said, "Hear what the unjust judge said. And shall not God avenge his own elect, which cry day and night unto him, though he bear long with them? I tell you, he will avenge them speedily." So what's he saying? He's saying that if the unjust judge dealt with this widow like that God is going to react out of love for those he loves, and he's going to do so speedily. This lady had several strikes against her. Number one, she was a lady. Ladies didn't have a lot of legal rights. Number two, somebody had chiseled her out of some money or something. And number three, she was up in front of this unjust judge. She didn't have the money to do what normally is done in a situation like that, and that's grease the palm. Back in the day of our Lord, judgeships were awarded by the Romans, but they were often, they were in essence purchased, much like political offices today. Now, I didn't say that, but you understand, if you don't have any money, you're not going to get anywhere in political office right now. But, so this lady had one tool. What did she have? She had persistence. And in the end, the judge got ticked off with her because she was constantly in his face. And I think we need to be constantly reminding the Lord of our situation. Pray until something happens. I think you need to pray about situations and not worry. I came to thinking about all of this today as I was thinking about some little trivial thing that I'm dealing with right now. And if I'm not careful, my brain goes off to worrying. There's a phrase that worry is faith in the negative. And I read a phrase that stuck with me for a long time now. Worry is wasting today's time to clutter up tomorrow's opportunity with yesterday's trouble. Do you like that? You're wasting today's time cluttering up tomorrow's opportunity with yesterday's trouble. And I've heard it says that worrying is like rocking in a rocking chair. It gives you something to do, but you don't go anywhere with it. And then point number 2 is pray until something happens. Don't quit. Pray persistently. This widow kept praying. And the most effective prayers in the Bible are those that are prayed persistently. In Psalm 55, David wrote that I will call to God and the Lord saves me. Evening, morning, and noon I cry out in distress and he hears my voice. So David wasn't like taking a one-a-day vitamin. He was praying all day long, praying in the morning, the afternoon, the evening. He was there. You remember the story of Hannah. Hannah wanted a child, and she prayed, and for years her prayers were not answered. She didn't say, well, I guess it's not God's will for me to have a child. She just kept on praying, and eventually her faith, her persistence was rewarded, and God gave her a son. Not any son, but Samuel, the mighty prophet. So persistence is an important factor in prayer. whatever you're facing right now, don't be tempted to give up. If you're ever tempted to give up, remember the composer Brahms. It took him 7 years to write the lullaby. Not a very long piece of music. He kept at it, and he took him 7 years to write it. Probably because he kept falling asleep at the piano. I don't know, but it was a long time that he prayed. And then don't doubt. Number 3, don't doubt. Pray positively. This morning I read I watched a little video from somebody that was talking about the necessity for abstaining or fasting. And they weren't talking about the fasting from food, but they were talking about the fasting from negative thoughts. Too often that we allow our prayers to have, well, he didn't do it yet, and he didn't do it for Mabel, and Uncle Harry died from it, etc., etc. The fact of the matter is we have to pray expecting that God is going to answer. I've told you the story before of the Sunday school teacher who had all of her students write a note to a missionary who was going through some tough times. And one little guy wrote a note, and he says, "Dear Mr. Missionary, I'm praying for you, but I'm not expecting an answer." And the teacher commented that, well, that's how a lot of people are with prayer. So keep it up and do expect an answer. God will answer. Sometimes he answers our prayers really quickly. The lady was driving into the shopping mall, drives into the mall, and as she's going into the mall, it starts to rain, and by the time she's got up by the front of the mall there, it is just chucking it down. So she does what I know I've done, perhaps you've done, and that's she prays, "Lord, I need a parking spot right here, right now." And even as she's muttering the words, the car that was parked in the prime spot in the whole parking lot backed out, and she drove in. And she said, "Oh, well, never mind, Lord, I found one myself." Found one myself. Yeah, I get it. Sometimes the Lord answers so quickly we don't even recognize that it's him answering. And sometimes the Lord answers immediately, but his answer is later. And that's really tough, isn't it? Sometimes we just want it when we want it, and we want it now. But sometimes God may not answer what we want when we want it, but he may have a better plan in mind for you and for me. And you look at your circumstances and say, well, I don't know what the better plan can be because my life is preoccupied with X. And but do we trust God or do we not? Ruth Graham, the wife of Billy Graham, once said, "If God had answered every prayer of mine, I would have married the wrong man 7 times." So God may have a better plan for you, and sometimes God may just answer no. That's not an answer that we want to hear, but sometimes we'll understand it one day, perhaps one day. Maybe it won't matter then. C.S. Lewis wrote that prayer is a request. And the essence of a request, as opposed to a demand, is that it may or may not be granted. And he said, if an infinitely wise being listens to the requests of finite and foolish people like you and me, of course he'll sometimes grant them and sometimes refuse them. And C.S. Lewis raised the question. He said, if God had granted all the silly prayers I've made in my life, where would I be now? So, interesting food for thought, right? So don't forget, today, fast from negative thinking and push. Pray until something happens. Sure love you. It's Friday. We'll be back on Sunday, and then next week we do it all again. Sure love you. See you then.